Hello, friends. Let's now move on to talk about the interaction of geopolitics, economy, globalization, and now the phase of deglobalization, from integration of manufacturing chains to supply chain resilience and manufacturing resilience, and the question of conflicts. Economic conflicts, perhaps leading to military conflicts, or vice versa. And looking at the history, let's say post World War II, post 1947, Indian independence, then 48, Chinese independence, its impact on Asia particularly, but globally generally, to the group of African nations, but we can basically divide them in terms of East Africa and West Africa, because the colonial powers were different. And particularly pick up the Sahel region where there is a lot of disturbance currently. Without going into too many numbers and not to make numbers game, broadly reflect that whatever has been happening in terms of GDP and what is the current GDP. We are also aware of the defects of that methodology. Even if you bring purchase price parity, even then there are problems. But it generally gives an idea of ranking, though the exact numbers are not right. Because many of the services, for example, housewives, the work they do and all that, are not counted in GDP. A lot of people in the unorganized sector, decentralized sector, I call them, individuals standing on roadside or driving a cycle rickshaw or a motorcycle rickshaw, their numbers in the GDP are not very well reflected. But we will look at that. We will then also look at what has been the dividends of peace. The word was first coined when Mr. Richard Nixon, 1971, was considering whether they should continue with the Vietnam War or not. And the number they say body count, which I hate. Body count is, number of people who die, and wounded are not even considered. So that is a great cost. That's the biggest cost of conflicts, military conflicts, terrorist activities. And then there is the issue of peace, because then the economy becomes better if there is peace. There is more GDP, there is more distributed in the society. The differences also go down because of that. And so our focus is the cost of war and the dividend of peace. Our focus is economics of war and the economics of peace. Now, recent conflict of Ukraine, where the numbers are available quite well, is a good case study which we will spend a little bit of time on to figure out the cost of the war and the economics of peace. The earlier war, particularly of Iraq, has been well documented in terms of the cost of war. Again, human beings on one hand, and then the economic activity. But Ukraine war is still going on, so we know the dynamics of the numbers there. This is not at the level of philosophy, because our philosophy, Hindu philosophy, says that peace is better. You should consider your neighbor as thy brother. Christianity says so. There is no religion where it says that you should fight with your neighbors, etc., etc. People who might interpret certain things about people belonging to another religion, but religion per se does not say it. And I will not go into detail, nor am I expert on theology. So let's pick up from the First World War. First World War happened, if you look at it, is basically the conflict of well-off European powers, not all European powers. Today there are 40 members in the European Union, but all these wars have been basically fought among 5 to 6 nations. Maybe 10 if you include Russia. And in that particular war, Germany was defeated, and very, very harsh terms were imposed on Germany, and a lot of reparations were there, and it was very, very difficult for them to come out of it. And frankly speaking, that particular decision of reparations, harsh reparations, is what generated the basic foundation for the discomfort in the German society, which somebody like Hitler was able to mobilize the youth of it in terms of a party of a particular kind, which also then developed the philosophy of uh, killing people who were very good in business but were not of your racial, uh, supposedly racial descent. And so Germany started the war on some basis, but actually it was somebody who went and killed the Austria. So there was an Austria-Hungary empire at that time. Hungary later on is considered one of the underdeveloped European countries, but the Austro-Hungarian empire was very big. Be that as it may, then the war spreads. Now, this is where, if there are statesmen, they can manage these things by diplomatic ways. If they had reduced the reparations, the war would not have taken place. But nobody would be the statesman enough at that time, and so the war spreads. And once Germany starts winning a number of territories in the beginning, including France, they become very ambitious, and they go and attack Russia also. And in the process, millions of people actually die. The number of people who have died in uh, Second World War is the highest ever, before or after, and hopefully it never will happen. So the cream of youth got destroyed in that, which will also have certain implications further down the line. So then there is not a peace sign, but it is a surrender sign. Similarly, nuclear bombs are thrown on Japan, two of them, and it will be always debated whether the second one was essential or whether the first one was also essential, because they were about to surrender even through the normal military mechanisms. They were alone. They are in a corner. There is nobody supporting them, and slowly they had been pushed back, and America had become quite strong because there was no war on the American soil. Actually, the war was far away from them. So that was the advantage. They were supplying the military equipment. Their military industrial complex became very strong. It is there till now. That is their main industry. That is the main industry, is the military industrial complex. And so the US was strong. So at that time, after the war, they dictated the terms of various kinds of new institutions, including United Nations, IMF, the Bretton Woods Agreement, dollar becoming the currency, reserve currency, and the currency for transactions, which gives it power till today. They have the power to print as many as they want, practically speaking, and they can afford to have $30 trillion. It was last year, now $33 trillion as the debt, which is basically the deficits per year of the revenue. In this year, it is coming out to be about $2 trillion. So if we $2 trillion, let's say, for example, the GDP of Canada. So that much deficit they have there, but they will be able to make it up. So generally, it gave them strength. I'm not going to great detail of the economics of it and the financials of it, but they earn a lot of money. The financial services industry is very strong. So after military industrial complex, second strong industry is the financial services industry, the USA and Europe also. Now, some countries like Sweden and Switzerland, which had remained neutral, then they became the center of the financial industry, and all over the world, people put their black money, number two money, real money, good money, hard-earned money for safety purposes. In Switzerland, they get 0% return. Sometimes they have to pay for keeping their money safe there. So now then, after the Second World War, therefore, there were heavy reparations. The Americans put up all the plants, chemical plants, formulas, people along with it, and so on. So industry was left, Germany was left industryless, and USA had the strongest industry at that time. Then, because the Eastern European countries like Romania, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Poland were were part of the USSR. So their industry was also all ripped off, and later on, USSR put their kind of industry, heavy industry, which was good, but then it was not that particularly efficient. And when the USSR broke in 1991, then um, um, their plants were closed down by the Western European companies, you can say. So they became deindustrialized. Now, now let's look at the other areas. Germany, however, people were hardworking, so in a decade or so they came up. There was a Marshall Plan to help out Europe. In the process, US acquired percentages in lots of the industrial companies, so their companies became the most valuable in the world. But Germany came up, France came up, and then Japan came up. So now let's say we are in the era of 1960s. Newer developments are taking place, scientific developments are taking place, electronics have started coming, and the moment the transistors came, at that time Japanese have taken a step ahead and become very good in the transistors, and Hong Kong becomes very good in terms of assembling those transistor-based radios and watches and things like that. So this thing happens. The second thing which happens is that countries like India, which had the cotton, which had the textile mills, which had designing capability, which had the dyes and so on, once again start slipping back to supplying fabrics designed by outside. And in a sense, in a supply chain, you become the lower edition supply chain. Uh, and, uh, uh, and as you start becoming good at it, it's very easy. You transfer that industry to Sri Lanka, or to Bangladesh, or to Vietnam, to Thailand, and therefore a cycle comes whereby then that industry shifts and the metropolitan company keeps a good tight hold on it. Now around 2000, when the YK2 problem came, because in the computers they had not put programs whereby you went into road 2000 rather than 1998 and 1999. So you had to go to 2000, and that work came to India because of a huge amount, everything had to be searched, etc., etc. And so that is the start of the ITS industry coming to India. The main engineers were there outside. Many of them were Indian too, whether it was Microsoft or it was other financial services firms who were then giving this work. So primarily the financial services back-end work of Europe and US came to India. And similar stretch took place that once the Japanese industry started becoming stronger, USA started putting pressure on them for revaluing their yen and make their industry non-competitive again. So they had to withdraw from various sections of the industry, which then went to Korea and Taiwan. Maybe it's the same companies going there. And now this phenomena continues there till now. And the Hong Kong companies started coming to Sichuan area and other close by Chinese areas to set up large scale factories. Now, one interesting thing happened at that time. A country like India had gone through a socialist kind of phase, and we had licensing, whereby the government said that you can make 5,000 scooters and not 10,000 scooters, and you said somebody can do this. Ostensible idea was that the resources will be allocated well, but they could not therefore think in terms of global markets. All these numbers were related to the domestic market. Domestic market was small anyway at that time. After that only it grew. Now our two-wheeler market is comparable to any other major country. But at that time it was very, very small. 10,000 used to be the maximum capacity of Ambassador and Fiat in the 60s. So our industrialization got affected by licensing, um, by planning process. Ostensibly like following the USSR, but actually not following the USSR system. USSR system was still in terms of acquiring a great competence in a particular area. In our case, the capital got therefore concentrated in certain hands, 10, 20, 30, 40 business houses, and they became conglomerates. So if a Tata is there, Tata has got Tata Steel, Tata Telco, it has Nelco for making radios, and it has a defense equipment factory, and it has tea company, it's got a coffee company, and so on. Now that is like a conglomerate, and there is enough research, Harvard Business School and others, that it is the single product line companies which specialize, which become very profitable, not the conglomerates. Conglomerates is like, I've got a financial portfolio and I keep on putting money. So the Japanese model was the Zaibatsu model. Big, large business houses, conglomerates, but each one of the company trying to excel in this one area, and unless they were 1, 2, or 3, they were shunted out. And from that Zaibatsu system, similar system came to Korea. Now remember, Korea was a colony before Second World War of Japan. China was not specifically a colony, but other European powers, especially England, had a lot of influence. For example, Hong Kong was taken on a lease for 99 years, forced lease, so to say. And then, of course, it was handed back to China. So now coming to therefore this region, 1956, the first war which really took place after Second World War was the Korean War. Korean War, if you try to figure out the reason, unless you are a connoisseur of these things, you can't even figure out why the war was there. Except to say that it was like a civil war between what is now North Korea and South Korea. But do we know why that civil war come out? It's difficult. It may be economic competition. I don't think it's racial or ethnic competition, but I don't really know also. So this is, I'm saying, the extent of our knowledge about Asia itself. Now, secondly, Japan, of course, as I said, recovered, but it's a small island with lots of people, so the space is always a problem. So their products are also there, small space can be taken care of and all that. So now the industrialization spreads to China. China, after taking care of the basic needs of the public, then goes into the industrialization. And US, sensing this, that it will become a very large manufacturing power, in 1971, inducts them into WTO, which means basically free trade between the two countries and so on and so forth. And of course now, USA imports from China at such a high level that all the rest of Europe does not compare with it. And therefore they encouraged it. At the same time, it's the American companies which could not make that much of headway into China. They made some headway into Japan. They were also very conservative, but they were able to make that headway in Korea. So a lot of the Korean companies, large companies, have American holdings in them. And Korea also went for dependent kind of thing. But as these new product lines came, you can say mobile was is a classic example. They became the experts in that. The conglomerates we have forgotten, Dow, for example, of Korea, and the whole shipping thing collapsed and other shipbuilding activities collapsed and all that. And like the Japanese Zaibatsus, which grew over 300 years, Koreans were trying to do it in 25 years. So many of their Zaibatsus crashed also. And so we know Korean products as basically Samsung. Okay, then Huawei is a combination, and you can say it's Japanese or it's Chinese or something. So electronics industry gave the opportunity to the Asian countries to be able to do minute work, precise work, and technological work, and come up. So now the fight which took place in Korea, as I said, the first major conflict after Second World War, led to South Korea and North Korea being the separate states. So, and they went their different ways. North Korea was touching China. It had the Chinese influence. The Chinese were the only ones, and maybe and the USSR, who had the guts at that time to compete when USA or European powers wanted to grab something. And all of them had good influence in most of the important countries of Asia. India, of course, the UK had it, to which we'll come. So we were all trying to come out of our post-colonial area. The kitties were empty, treasuries were empty. The education system had to be built up. So some commercial exchanges took place between Japan and the other Asian countries. But basically, they were influenced by what was happening in USA and some European countries, and picked up the technologies. But then they got crushed by USA itself by manipulating their exchange rate. Be that as it may, from there onwards, Japan became like a 0% growth economy, or 0 to 1%, you can say, and also inflation very small during that particular period, and therefore its fast acceleration period stopped. China fast acceleration period is 1990 to 2010 or so. After that, its acceleration rate has started reducing, and India's fast acceleration rate is from 2000 onwards. When during Dr. Manmohan Singh's government, we were doing more than 10%. Korea was growing very fast. Now, so let's put it this way: second conflict came in Vietnam. Why? USA went there because it was a colony of France, and there was a colony of and the Indochina, which was also basically the French colonies, Laos, Cambodia, and French were being driven out, and as they were being driven out, the USA jumped into it, created a conflict, and there also a civil war between North Vietnam and South Vietnam. I have read some history. I still don't know why did they fought. Why did they fight? Somebody turned them on. It is something like, why India and Pakistan fight. Because border problems were there, created, and we fought. Otherwise, there is no logic for what India and Pakistan to fight, or India and Bangladesh to fight, or India or Sri Lanka to fight ever. So the colonialists had sowed the seeds of conflicts. Now, if there were statesmen like Gandhiji, statesman philosopher, he could manage to carry the country along for 20 odd years by mobilizing them against the British, but non-violent ways. There are very few examples. There are few examples in Africa who followed him. Patrick Lumumba was one of them, but then he was assassinated. There are a number of other cases, about dozens of them. Such leaders have been assassinated in Africa. We will come to Africa also. Now, Asia, if we now consider, let's say Singapore has been one of the most prosperous places, and National University of Singapore is a very highly intellectual place. There is one Mr. Kishore Mebwani, who is the former head of the civil service of Singapore and was also their representative in UN. So he talks about the Asian century. There is also an Asia Society, which is a think tank. There are not too many think tanks either in Asia. And if there are, we don't even read each other's languages, like Korean language or Japanese language or Chinese language. We don't. We read English. We can also read Spanish. We can also read French. But we can't read Arabic. We can't read something. So therefore, we are devoid of thinking in these areas. Now, so the South Vietnam, North Vietnam fight, USA gets in and goes on for 20 years. Massive destruction. And you can see it from this point of view. After the peace there in Vietnam, or after the peace in South Korea, look at the growth they've had. That means the society had the capacity. But so many years, young men go, society is destroyed, young men go means families also don't form. What will so many ladies do? How many will they marry a man? One only, no? So that means they remain unmarried. Other sociological problems come. So the thinking about, though some think tanks got formed even in Japan, because they saw the impact of nuclear bomb. And they, by constitution, they were prohibited from having a military, but now they have that. They can have defensive military, not an aggressive military. I don't know how it will make a difference, because technology has come so much. So, therefore, these economies developed. ASEAN got formed, Association of Southeast Nations, without much of a flutter, and it is a group now which has GDP equivalent to the European GDP. And the the technology spread, manufacturing spread. There was some reliance, there was reliance, there is reliance for markets. And that is where the US and Europe has played their game, that we will stop the access to our markets. If you don't behave, WTO is that particular process. Now, have there been other conflicts, armed conflicts in Asia? Well, the one which is made out maximum, because of which world may get destroyed, etc., is Taiwan and China. China from day one has said that it is inalienable part of our territory. The guys, the Republicans, I think they were called, they had got defeated. Chiang Kai-shek, he was the leader, and they went to this island. That doesn't mean that that island is not part of the, because there were indigenous people there. So I don't want to summarize it that fast on a complex issue, but China point is very simple. It is ours. They make everybody sign a one China policy before they deal with him. USA included, Europe included, India included. So none of us recognize Taiwan as a separate country. But the USA and Europe treat it as a separate country, otherwise, and etc. And Taiwanese have developed the technology very well also. They picked up their niches, and that niche was semiconductors. And they are the masters of that. Manufacture 70-80% of the chips of the world, export same 70-80% of the world chips market. Then the Korea is there. That's about it. Europe hardly produces any chips anymore. So the time has come that some of the industries Europe does not even figure in. The automobile industry today, if you look at the ranking is number 1 China, number 2 Japan, number 3 is Korea, then some Vietnamese will come, and Germany, it is closing down. So let's say that through Bretton Woods agreement and UN type of institutions, America and Europe then once again control. They are G7, and meeting may be there of G77 in Cuba. Nobody even reports that. G20 is there, but G20 they agreed something which was to keep quiet about who is the aggressor and who is not the aggressor, and try to go for peace between Ukraine and Russia. But Mr. Biden has spoken there, and of course Zelensky was invited, saying everything is fault of Russia without going to background. Now this is the real politics of it. This is the real politics, that even if you develop other groupings which are not dominated by the West, they can come and cancel it, just like that in 2 days' time, 5 days' time. What has been said there. Therefore, they are paperless tigers. So we kind of stop with this very wide angle covering description of the geopolitics, and come to a little bit more specifics. Now, what are these more specifics? I think we should consider Ukraine, because it has all the angles. We should consider not whole of Africa, but Sahel region, for example, and maybe just briefly touch upon the other parts too. Third, we should consider Asia. Fourth, we can consider even this specific incident of problem with the Canada. We can think about Kashmir problem. We can think about the problem of Islamophobia in Europe, which is increasing, and then come to what impact these things have on the economics relationship. And we should look at it, how new networks which are developing, including IIC, the North-South Corridor, Persian, the Mongolian Corridor, the major new work of infrastructure is happening in Asia, and singling out of so many important oil countries, and they are all oil-bearing countries, and they all would have been at a very different state if they had not been sanctioned. Iraq, Venezuela, Guinea, Libya, Iran, Russia, to the extent that this is a part as they're forming under the BRICS, that they will be the most powerful economic force. And they are talking about their own currency. Their reliance on the American currency will go down. Yes, it is not that easy, but they have got so tired. So now we will therefore link it up to what has been said in the UN. We had earlier considered what has been said in G20, especially Mr. Lula. Mr. Lula is president of Brazil, has been there earlier also a couple of times, then was imprisoned also. A socialist person. He has been unemployed when he was young, as he told Mr. Biden yesterday in a meeting. And so what Mr. Lula says, what Mr. Ramaphosa says, what the Nigerian president says, uh, have an inkling of this. Now, by the way, the other G7 people these days don't talk much. French or British people, of course, they talk because they are becoming a recession economy now. Korea doesn't talk much. Japan doesn't talk much. Or maybe they talk in their language and we don't know it. So we will link this all up to a peace mechanism. Thank you.